Kevin Bailey didn't walk into PMQs to ask questions, he came in to set a fire. Armed with Lord Robertson's brutal warning, underprepared, underinsured, under attack, he turned defense policy into a direct political weapon aimed straight at the Prime Minister. What followed wasn't a debate. It was containment failure. Shouting from the chamber, interruptions mid-sentence, the Speaker forced into damage control just to keep the session from spiraling. Bailey kept tightening the grip. Accusations of misrepresentation, demands for direct answers, zero space for political deflection. Every time the Prime Minister tried to shift the narrative, it got dragged right back into accountability. And then it escalated further. Claims, rebuttals, procedural clashes, until the chamber stopped feeling like Parliament and started feeling like a pressure cooker seconds from blowing. Because this wasn't just a PMQs clash. It was a live struggle over control, credibility, and who actually gets to define the truth inside the House.
He lost to misrepresented. Let's stop talking about what I didn't say. Let's start talking about what he...
What unfolded in this Commons exchange wasn't just another PMQs back and forth. It had the texture of a chamber struggling to stay in control while political pressure kept rising with every sentence. From the very beginning, Kevin Bailey didn't approach the session like a standard opposition question. He entered with a structured attack built around credibility, authority, and external validation, immediately anchoring his criticism in Lord Robertson's warnings about defense complacency and national preparedness. That framing mattered because it shifted the tone instantly. Instead of a routine policy disagreement, the Prime Minister was being confronted through the voice of a respected former defense secretary and ex-NATO chief. The language, underprepared, underinsured, under attack, wasn't neutral commentary. It was designed to feel like institutional alarm bells, and Bailey used that weight to escalate pressure in the chamber. But what made the exchange visibly tense was not just the content, it was the disruption around it. Interjections, calls for order, and the Speaker stepping in repeatedly turned the flow into something fractured. The rhythm of PMQs, which normally relies on structured question and answer pacing, started to break down under competing voices. That breakdown itself became part of the story. Bailey then shifted strategy from framing to confrontation. Once the defense argument was established, he moved into direct accusation territory, questioning misrepresentation, challenging the government's position on Iran, and pushing the Prime Minister to stop addressing interpretations and instead address actions. That pivot is important because it marked a transition from political positioning to direct accountability pressure. At the same time, the Prime Minister's responses were repeatedly challenged mid-flow, not just by Bailey, but by the atmosphere of the chamber itself. The interruptions and procedural corrections created a sense that no single voice was fully controlling the narrative. That is often where PMQs becomes politically significant, not in what is said cleanly, but in what gets disrupted, interrupted, or forced off course. One of the key dynamics in this exchange was the tension between accusation and procedure. Bailey was clearly trying to keep the focus locked on policy accountability, while the Speaker's interventions and chamber noise reflected the institutional effort to maintain order. Those two forces collided repeatedly, creating a layered sense of pressure: political pressure from the opposition and structural pressure from parliamentary rules. As the exchange progressed, the focus narrowed further into a credibility contest. Bailey's repeated insistence on stopping "what I didn't say" and focusing on "what he isn't doing" signaled a deliberate rhetorical shift. Instead of defending his position, he reframed the debate entirely around government performance and accountability gaps. That move is often used in high-stakes parliamentary moments because it strips away defensive framing and forces the opponent into reactive mode. What stands out most is how quickly the session moved from policy discussion into a controlled confrontation over trust, interpretation, and authority. The repeated interruptions, the Speaker's attempts to stabilize proceedings, and the rising intensity of exchanges all contributed to a sense that the chamber was operating at its limits of order. In broader terms, this wasn't just about defense policy or Iran or procedural disputes. It was about control of narrative inside a highly structured political environment. Bailey's approach was to keep pressure constant, prevent rhetorical escape routes, and force direct answers. The government's position, meanwhile, was pulled between defending policy choices and maintaining procedural control in a noisy, reactive setting. By the end, what remains most striking is not a single quote or moment, but the overall atmosphere. A chamber where authority was constantly being challenged. Interruptions shaped the rhythm of debate, and no side fully achieved narrative dominance. It felt less like a polished parliamentary exchange and more like a live contest over accountability, where every attempt to steady the conversation only revealed how unstable the exchange had become. In that sense, the clip resonates beyond the immediate political clash. It reflects a wider public frustration with how answers are given, how questions are controlled, and how accountability is negotiated in real time under pressure.